Hello everyone, you're very welcome to this talk on completing your dissertation. So I just want to give you a few pointers about completing your write-up. There's a lot of details clearly on my website and particularly on the sub-page about the final stage, but the project guidelines as well has good details on completing the dissertation. If anyone has any questions, please do email me and I'm more than happy to respond. And questions about the dissertation I'll include in the frequently asked questions on this page as well. The good news is you have a lot of your dissertation written already because the interim report this year is styled exactly the same way as the dissertation. In previous years it was a slightly different style of document, but my take on it is chapters 1, 2 and 3 map exactly onto your dissertation, chapters 1, 2 and 3. That doesn't mean there won't be writing and rewriting, drafting and redrafting. That's the nature of it, I'm afraid. So I'd suck it in and accept the fact that you'll definitely have to rewrite sections a few times. But it's okay, it's doable. And I definitely think, if you think about, let's say, your introduction chapter, what you thought it was going to be about when you wrote the proposal is different from where you were at Christmas, and it's going to be totally different from where you are now. So let's move on to the introduction chapter. You definitely have the bulk of it written, but it is one that I think not only do you write and rewrite, but when you've finished the write-up and written your conclusions, it's one you should go back and revisit. Because you can't really conclude anything in the conclusion that you haven't introduced in the introduction. So I think I would be rewriting that several times. Rewrite it now, add in anything in terms of scope, in terms of the project description, in terms of even background that you've learned more about, or because most people's project will have changed in terms of their direction somewhat, to change the project description, the aims and objectives, all of that stuff now, but you will be revisiting it again at the end. But the more you learn about the project, and even during the write-up process, you learn a lot about the project. The literature review chapter, I think, again, is one you've got an awful lot of it written already. It could be the case, let's say, in your project you were doing image processing, and you realize now in the last couple of weeks that you need to add in AI to help the image processing work. Well, if that's the case, then it definitely makes sense to add in a section in the literature review about AI as well. So it might be something dramatic like that, or it could be just you need to, whether or not you need to add in a new section, take the time now to add in a few new papers, a few new textbooks, a few new software, bits of software that has inspired you, and just bulk up that chapter a bit so that then the final literature review is good and fat. I'd say add a third more onto it. You've got a good chunk of the experimental design chapter written as well. In the interim report, it's called prototype design, so just change that chapter name to experimental design. You've got some designs of the system, some maybe use cases or entity relationship diagrams or things like that, or screen prototypes. Leave them as they are, don't change them, just say that it's evolved now and add in new designs, add in new class diagrams, add in new ERDs, and just say that you're evolving the design as time goes on. Chapter 4, the development chapter, again called prototype development in the interim report, change that name to experimental development. And it's to tell the story of your developmental process. Everything you built up to Christmas, that stays and says, that's what I learned up to that point. Maybe I changed programming language or changed tech, or maybe I kept it the same. Doesn't matter, whichever. Leave that in as it is and just say, well, I kept on going that way, or I changed my technologies, or I changed my approach. But everything you've done, include it. Talk about what went well in your development process. Talk about what went badly. Talk about those dead ends. So I tried to add in a new approach, and it didn't work. Write it in. Include samples of code. If there was an approach you thought this might work and then it didn't, brilliant. That's more stuff to show that you were being active. Any bit of code you wrote, essentially, take a little snippet of it, between 5 and 10 lines of code, and illustrate the key logic of the sections of code that are important, and definitely what sources of information did you find? Did you talk to anyone about your development process? Anything that helps your programming, stick it all in that chapter. And it will be a long chapter, definitely, and that's absolutely great. Your next chapter is your results and evaluation. So results are what numbers did you get, but also how good are those numbers? How did you test the software? What performance metrics did you use? Did you compare it to other people's research or other benchmarks or things like that? What numbers did you get and how good are they? How reliable are they? If I was doing a prediction and I ran my model only once, is that as effective as running it 100 times and getting the average of the 100 times? No, it's not as effective. Not only do we want a number, but we want to say how good that number is. So the more you can ground your results in reality, the better. And then your final chapter is the conclusions and future work. In some way, I see the conclusions as a summary with the because. So what are the key points from the literature? Let's say you were to summarize the literature saying, there's a lot of literature in this area, but it doesn't cover specifically my project. Then you'd add in the word because nobody's taken this point of view before. So a conclusion is a summary plus a because. It's AI has real potential in terms of solving this problem because it has techniques that could be used to make it effective. So roughly what I always say is a couple of points from your literature review, two key things you learned, two new things, the two most salient points, the two most important details from your literature review. Three things you learned from the design chapter. When you were designing the thing, I explored maybe a 2-tier architecture, but then I learned a 3-tier is a better way to go. 4 things from your development chapter. Never program in Python. Something like that might be a learning because, and explain why. And then 4 key points from the evaluation. What were your findings and why? Because. So in essence, we're talking about what went well and what went badly again in the conclusions, but also your future work. So just to describe what approaches you might take in the future. If you're saying I should create a new screen, create a little prototype of it. If you're saying I should add a few new methods into the system, take your existing class diagram and draw in green, we'll say, or red, the new methods and add them into the diagram. But I think create some visualization, represent what you mean by your future directions. So if I just say, yeah, we should test this with more people, or if I had more time, I'd add in more code. That's okay. That's not really a future work. Future work is a definite new thing to add on, a new approach. And if you think of maybe between 6 and 8 ideas for future work, I'd include a diagram or a picture or something for at least 3 or 4 of them to indicate what you mean by that. Because sometimes when I read these future works, I don't really know what people mean, or the picture in my head, I'm not sure if that's the same one in your head. So if you're saying I should change the interface, mock up something to say like below, and then at least we'll know exactly what you mean. Thanks very much. I hope this was helpful. We'll see you soon.